The air in the attic smelled like salt and thyme. Dust hung in the narrow light that came through the round window, the kind of light that makes you feel like you're standing inside a memory. Instead of just remembering it, Samuel Hartley sat on a wooden crate sorting through boxes. He should have thrown away decades ago. Between a water-stained envelope and a grocery list, he found it. An envelope addressed in handwriting. He recognized immediately because it was his own. The name written across the front was Margaret Hale. The postmark read the year she died. The return address was his cottage by the sea. He stared at it for a long time, his breath shallow, his fingers trembling. The ink impossibly was still wet. Now, let's find out what really happened. I suppose I should tell you that I'm not the kind of man who believes in ghosts. Never have been, really. I worked as a postman for 42 years, and in all that time, I learned one thing for certain. Letters go where you send them, or they don't go at all. There's no magic in the mail. Just people, mistakes, and a whole lot of stamps. But that morning, sitting in my attic with that envelope in my hands, I started to wonder if maybe I'd been wrong about everything. The handwriting was mine. I knew that much. I'd written thousands of letters in my life, addressed thousands of envelopes, and I could recognize my own scrawl even after all this time. But I didn't remember writing this one. Not to her. Not to Margaret. I thought maybe it was something I'd drafted once and forgotten to send. You know, the way you sometimes find old shopping lists in coat pockets. But the envelope was sealed. Stamped. The postmark was clear as day. And it had been delivered to my attic, decades after it should have been lost or burned or buried with her. I turned it over in my hands. My fingers left smudges on the paper. The ink from the address started to rub off just a little, staining my thumb. I should have been rational about it. I should have laughed, tossed it aside, gone downstairs and made myself some tea. But I didn't. I just sat there staring at her name. Margaret Hale. God, I hadn't said that name out loud in years. She was someone I loved once. Really loved, I mean. Not the way you love someone you marry because it makes sense, or because your families get along, or because you're tired of being alone. I loved her the way you love someone when you're young and stupid, and you think the world's gonna break in half if you can't have them. We were supposed to meet one night. I was supposed to get on a train with her. We were gonna leave together, start over somewhere new. But I didn't show up. I stayed home. I told myself it was because of the rain, or because I was scared, or because I wasn't ready. But the truth was simpler than that. I was a coward. She got on that train without me, and it never reached the next station. I heard about it weeks later. A derailment, fog and bad signals, and a curve the conductor didn't see in time. 16 people died. Margaret was one of them. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't write to her family. I just disappeared into my own life. Got a job, got married, had kids, grew old, and I told myself I'd forgotten about her. But I hadn't. Not really. I held the envelope up to the light. I could see the shape of paper inside, folded once, maybe twice. My heart was pounding. I didn't want to open it. I really didn't. Because if I opened it, I'd have to read whatever I'd written to her all those years ago. I'd have to face whatever version of myself had been. Dumb enough or brave enough to put his feelings into words. And honestly, I wasn't sure I could handle that. But my hands didn't listen to my brain. They never do they? I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. The sound was louder than it should have been. The paper inside was thin, almost fragile. I unfolded it slowly like I was defusing a bomb, and then I started to read. The letter was short, maybe a dozen lines, but every word hit me like a fist. It started with an apology. I'm sorry I didn't come. I'm sorry I left you waiting. I'm sorry I was too afraid to choose you. And then it said something I didn't expect. It said, I know you're reading this now decades later, because you finally need to hear it. You need to know that I forgive you, and you need to forgive yourself. I stopped reading. My hands were shaking. The ink was still wet. I mean really wet, like it had just been written. I could smudge it with my thumb. I could smell it, that sharp chemical smell of fresh ink. How was that possible? How could a letter written 40 years ago still be drying? I looked around the attic half, expecting to see someone standing in the corner watching me. But there was no one, just boxes and dust, and the sound of the wind rattling the window. I folded the letter back up and slipped it into my pocket. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what it meant. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a letter from the past. This was something else. Something that had been waiting for me to be ready. I climbed down the attic ladder, my knees creaking with every step. The house felt different now, quieter, like it was holding its breath. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. But I couldn't drink it. I just stood there staring out the window at the ocean. The waves were grey and choppy the way they always are in late autumn. I used to love the sea. It was one of the reasons I moved here after I retired. But now it just looked cold, endless, like it could swallow everything and not even notice. I pulled the letter out of my pocket and read it again. And again. Each time I noticed something new. A word I'd missed. A phrase that didn't quite make sense. And then near the bottom, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A single sentence written in a hand that wasn't quite mine. It said the letter will find you when you're ready to deliver it. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been minutes. Could have been hours. Eventually, I folded the letter back up and put it in the drawer by the sink, next to the old batteries and the spare keys. I told myself I'd deal with it later, but I knew I wouldn't. I knew I'd avoid it the same way. I'd avoided everything else in my life that scared me. That night I dreamed about her, about Margaret. We were standing on a train platform, and she was wearing a blue coat I'd never seen before. She looked at me and smiled, and I tried to tell her I was sorry, but the words wouldn't come out. The train pulled into the station and she got on without saying a word. I watched it leave, and I woke up with my pillow soaked in sweat. The next morning, I went back to the attic. I don't know why. Maybe I thought the letter would be gone like it had never existed. But it was still there in the drawer, ink still wet. And I realized something. This wasn't going to go away. Whatever this was, it wasn't finished. And neither was I. I spent the next few days trying to convince myself I was losing my mind. Maybe I'd had a stroke. Maybe the letter was just some weird hallucination, brought on by too much time alone and not enough sleep. But every time I checked the drawer, it was still there. The ink was still wet, and the letter still said the same impossible things. I started avoiding the kitchen. I'd make my coffee in the living room using the old kettle. I kept on the bookshelf. I'd eat toast standing up in the hallway. Anything to keep from opening that drawer. But it didn't matter. The letter was everywhere. I'd see it in my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I'd hear it in the wind outside. I'd smell the ink on my hands even after I scrubbed them raw. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the letter, shoved it in my jacket pocket, and walked out the door. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't sit in that house for another second. The air outside was cold and sharp. The kind of cold that stings your lungs when you breathe too deep. I walked along the cliff path that ran behind my cottage, the one that overlooked the sea. The waves were loud today, crashing against the rocks like they were trying to break something. I thought about Margaret, about the last time I saw her. We'd been sitting in a cafe near the train station, drinking terrible coffee and talking about nothing. She kept checking the clock on the wall, and I kept pretending not to notice. She wanted me to say I'd go with her. She wanted me to choose her, and I didn't. I just sat there stirring my coffee, letting the moment slip away. She left without saying goodbye, and I let her. I walked for hours until my legs ached and my lungs burned. Eventually, I found myself standing in front of the old park on the edge of town. I didn't mean to go there. I swear I didn't. But my feet carried me there anyway, like they knew something I didn't. The park used to be something else. A row of houses, I think. Or maybe a school. I couldn't remember anymore. But now, it was just a patch of grass and a few benches and a single oak tree, standing in the center like a monument. There was a plaque at the base of the tree. I'd never noticed it before. It was small, bronze, weathered by rain and time. I knelt down and brushed the dirt off with my sleeve. The words were faint, but I could still read them. For Margaret Hale, who waited for her letter. I stopped breathing, just stopped. My chest felt tight like someone had wrapped a rope around it and pulled. I read the plaque again. And again. It didn't change. Her name was right there, carved into metal, permanent and real. Who waited for her letter? What did that mean? How could anyone have known? I stood up dizzy and looked around the park. There was no one else there, just me and the tree and the sound of the wind in the branches. I pulled the letter out of my pocket and held it against my chest. The paper felt warm, almost alive, and then I heard someone call my name. I turned around. A woman was walking toward me from the other side of the park. She was young, maybe 30, with dark hair, pulled back in a ponytail and dirt on her knees like she'd been gardening. She was carrying a pair of shears and a basket full of dead flowers. She stopped a few feet away from me and tilted her head, like she was trying to figure out if I was real. "You're Samuel Hartley, right?" I nodded. I didn't trust my voice yet. "I thought so. I've seen pictures of you." "Pictures? Where?" She smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile people give you at funerals. My grandmother had a whole box of them. She kept them in her closet. I found them after she passed. I didn't understand. "Who's your grandmother?" "Margaret Hale." The ground tilted under my feet. I reached out and grabbed the tree to keep from falling. The woman stepped forward like she was going to catch me, but I waved her off. I just needed a second to think. That's not possible. Margaret didn't have kids. She died before she could. She had a sister. "My mother." "I'm Eliza." I stared at her, really looked at her, and I saw it, the shape of her eyes, the way she held her shoulders. She looked like Margaret. Not exactly, but close enough that it made my throat tight. "Your grandmother talked about me? All the time? She used to tell me this story when I was little, about a letter that would one day find its own way home. I thought it was just a fairy tale, you know? Something she made up to help me sleep. But she said it like she really believed it, like it was gonna happen." I pulled the letter out of my pocket and held it up. Eliza's eyes went wide. "Is that it?" "I don't know. Maybe. I found it in my attic a few days ago. It's addressed to her, in my handwriting, but I don't remember writing it." Eliza stepped closer. She reached out like she wanted to touch it but stopped herself. "Can I see?" I handed it to her. She unfolded it carefully like it might fall apart in her hands. Her eyes moved across the words, and I watched her face change. First confusion, then sadness, then something else, something I couldn't name. "This is it. This is the letter she was waiting for." "How do you know?" "Because she told me what it would say. She said it would be an apology. She said it would come from someone who loved her, but was too scared to say it. She said when it finally arrived, it would mean he was ready to let go." I felt something crack inside my chest. Not painful exactly. More like something that had been stuck for a long time finally breaking free. I sat down on the ground, right there in the dirt. Eliza sat down next to me. "I don't understand any of this. How could she know? How could she tell you about a letter I didn't even know I'd written? Maybe you did write it, just not when you think you did. What's that supposed to mean?" She handed the letter back to me. "Look at it. Really look. Does it feel like something you wrote 40 years ago?" I looked. The handwriting was mine, but it was also different. Shakier. Older. The words were the same ones I would have used back then, but the way they were arranged felt new. Like someone had taken my thoughts and rearranged them into something clearer, something truer. "I think you wrote this recently, maybe without even knowing it. And somehow, it found its way back to when it needed to exist. That's insane. Is it? You're holding a letter with wet ink that's been postmarked for decades. You're sitting under a tree with a plaque that says, 'My grandmother was waiting for something that just showed up.' Insane doesn't even cover it." She had a point. I folded the letter back up and put it in my pocket. The ink stained my fingers again. I looked at the tree at the plaque at Eliza, sitting next to me with dirt on her jeans and sadness in her eyes. And I realized something. This wasn't about the letter. Not really. It was about something bigger, something I'd been running from my whole life. I was supposed to meet her that night, the night she got on the train. We were going to leave together, start fresh, but I got scared. I thought about my family and my job and all the things I'd be giving up, and I just couldn't do it. So I stayed home, and she left, and she died. She didn't blame you. How do you know? Because she told me. She said love isn't about being brave all the time. It's about being honest. And you were honest. You weren't ready. That's not a crime. It feels like one. Eliza stood up and brushed the dirt off her knees. She looked down at me with that same sad smile. She also said something else. She said the letter would come when you needed it most, when you were finally ready to forgive yourself. So maybe that's what this is. Maybe this is your chance. I didn't know what to say to that. I just sat there staring at the plaque at her name carved into bronze. Margaret Hale, who waited for her letter. And I thought about all the years I'd spent pretending I didn't care, pretending I'd moved on, pretending the guilt wasn't eating me alive from the inside out. I don't know how to forgive myself. Then maybe start by finishing what you started. Deliver the letter. She's dead. How am I supposed to deliver a letter to someone who's dead? Eliza knelt down next to me. She put her hand on my shoulder and squeezed. You're holding it, aren't you? You're reading it. You're here. Maybe that's all the delivery she ever needed. I looked at her, really looked, and I saw Margaret in her eyes. Not just the shape or the color, but the way she looked at me. Like she could see right through all the walls I'd built. Like she knew exactly what I was thinking, even when I didn't. Will you help me? Help you what? Read it. Out loud. Here, under this tree. I can't do it alone. Eliza smiled. A real smile this time. Yeah, I can do that. We sat under the tree for a while, neither of us saying anything. The wind picked up scattering leaves across the grass. The sky was getting darker, like rain was coming. I pulled the letter out of my pocket one more time. The paper felt heavier now, like it was full of something I couldn't see. You ready? I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. Eliza took the letter from my hands and unfolded it. She cleared her throat and started to read. Dear Margaret, I'm sorry I didn't come. Her voice cracked on the last word. She stopped and looked at me. I nodded for her to keep going. I'm sorry I left you waiting at that station. I'm sorry I was too afraid to choose you. I told myself it was because I wasn't ready. Because I had responsibilities. Because leaving would hurt too many people. But the truth is I was just scared. Scared of what it would mean to love someone that much. Scared of what I'd lose if I did. I closed my eyes. I could see it all again. The rain. The empty platform. The sound of the train pulling away. Margaret's face in the window looking back one last time. I'd watched from across the street hidden in the shadows like a coward. And I'd let her go. I've thought about you every day since. Every single day. I got married. I had kids. I built a life. But none of it felt real. None of it felt like mine. Because the only thing I ever really wanted was to be brave enough to get on that train with you. Eliza's voice was shaking now. Tears were running down her face, but she didn't stop. She kept reading. I know it's too late. I know you're gone, but I need you to know that I loved you. I really did. And I'm sorry I never told you. I'm sorry I let fear win. I'm sorry I wasted the one chance I had to be happy. The wind picked up again stronger this time. The letter trembled in Eliza's hands. I reached out and held one corner to keep it from blowing away. We read the last lines together, our voices, mixing until I couldn't tell which words were hers and which were mine. I hope wherever you are, you've found peace. I hope you've forgiven me. And I hope someday I can forgive myself. I'm sorry, Margaret. I'm so sorry. The letter slipped from our hands. Just slipped right out like it had a mind of its own. It lifted into the air carried by the wind, tumbling end over end across the grass. We both stood up and watched it go. It drifted toward the edge of the park, toward the cliffs, toward the sea. And then it was gone. Eliza wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She was still crying, but she was smiling too. She heard you. How do you know? I just do. We stood there for a while, watching the clouds roll in. The rain started slow at first, just a few drops, then harder. Eliza pulled her jacket over her head and laughed. We should get out of here before we drown. Yeah, probably, but neither of us moved. We just stood there in the rain under that tree with the plaque that said her name. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, but something close. Something like relief. Thank you. Eliza looked at me. For what? For helping me. For believing me. For not thinking I was crazy. You're welcome. But I didn't do it for you. I did it for her. I know. She started to walk away but stopped and turned back. You know she really did love you, right? My grandmother. She told me once that you were the only person who ever really saw her. The only one who made her feel like she wasn't alone. She told you that? She did. And she also said that if she could go back, she'd still get on that train, even knowing how it ended, because at least she got to love someone who mattered. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Eliza waved and walked back across the park, disappearing into the rain. I stood there for a few more minutes, staring at the spot where the letter had vanished. And then I walked home. The house felt different when I got back, warmer somehow, like something that had been missing had finally returned. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the storm roll in over the ocean. The waves were huge, crashing against the rocks, sending spray 20 feet into the air. I thought about Margaret, about the train, about all the years I'd spent running from the truth. And I thought about the letter, how it had found me when I needed it most, how it had given me a chance to say the things I should have said a lifetime ago, how it had finally let me say goodbye. I don't know if I believe in magic. I don't know if I believe in fate or destiny or any of that, but I believe in this. I believe that some things wait. They wait until you're ready, until you're strong enough to face them. And when the time is right, they find you. That night I slept better than I had in years. No dreams, no nightmares, just silence. And when I woke up the next morning, the sun was shining and the air smelled clean like the storm had washed everything away. I went to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I'd kept the letter. It was empty. No ink stains, no torn envelope, nothing. Like it had never existed. But I knew it had. I could still feel it in my chest. That crack that had opened up when I read those words out loud. That space where the guilt used to live. It wasn't gone completely. I don't think it ever would be. But it was smaller now, manageable, like something I could carry without it crushing me. I went outside and walked down to the cliffs. The ocean was calm today, flat and grey like glass. I stood at the edge and looked out at the horizon, and I whispered into the wind. It's finally been delivered. I don't know if she heard me. I don't know if she was even listening, but it didn't matter, because I'd said it. I'd said the words I should have said 40 years ago. And that was enough. Over the next few weeks, I kept going back to the park. I'd sit under that tree and read or just think. Or sometimes I'd just sit there doing nothing at all. Eliza would come by sometimes with her basket and her shears tending to the flowers around the plaque. We'd talk, not about Margaret, not about the letter, just normal things. The weather, the news, her job, my garden. It was nice, comfortable, like we'd known each other for years instead of just weeks. One afternoon she asked me something I wasn't expecting. Do you ever wish you'd made a different choice? About what? About that night. About not getting on the train. I thought about it for a long time. I used to think about it every day. What my life would have been like if I'd been brave enough. Where we would have gone. What we would have done. But now I don't know. I think maybe things happened the way they were supposed to. You really believe that? I think I'm starting to. She smiled. Good. Because I think she would have wanted you to be happy. Not stuck. Not guilty, just happy. I think so too. We sat there until the sun started to set, painting the sky, pink and orange and gold. And I realized something. The letter hadn't just been about forgiveness. It had been about letting go, about accepting that some things can't be changed, about learning to live with the choices you make, even when they hurt. And maybe that was the real delivery, not the words on the page, but the act of saying them out loud, of admitting the truth, of finally being honest. Time passed the way it always does, slow and fast at the same time. The leaves changed color and fell. The air got colder. The ocean turned from grey to black. I kept going to the park, kept sitting under that tree, and slowly, the weight I'd been carrying for all those years started to lift. I didn't forget about Margaret. I don't think I ever could. But I stopped feeling like I owed her something. Like I had to spend the rest of my life punishing myself for a choice I made when I was young and scared and stupid. I started to remember the good parts instead. The way she laughed. The way she looked at me like I was the only person in the room. The way she made me feel like I mattered. And I started to forgive myself. Not all at once. Not completely, but little by little. Day by day. Until one morning I woke up and realized I didn't feel guilty anymore. I just felt sad. And sadness I could live with. Sadness was honest. Sadness was real. Eliza and I became friends. real friends. She'd invite me over for dinner sometimes, and we'd sit in her kitchen talking about nothing and everything. She reminded me of Margaret in small ways, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, the way she laughed at her own jokes. But she was her own person too, strong and kind and more patient with me than I deserved. One evening, she handed me an envelope across the table. It was cream-colored, soft at the edges. My heart skipped a beat. "What's this?" "Just open it." I turned it over. My name was written on the front in handwriting I didn't recognize. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out a single piece of paper. It was a letter, short, maybe 3 lines. It said, "Thank you for delivering what needed to be delivered." Some letters take a lifetime to write, but they always arrive exactly when they're supposed to. It was signed with a single initial. Meh. I looked up at Eliza. She was watching me with that same sad smile. "Where did you get this?" "I found it in my grandmother's things. She left instructions. Said to give it to you when the time was right." "When did she write this?" "I don't know. But does it matter?" I read the letter again. The handwriting wasn't Margaret's. At least I didn't think it was. But the words felt like hers. Like something she would say. Like something she wanted me to know. No, I guess it doesn't. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. And I realized something. This wasn't about magic or fate or letters that delivered themselves. This was about love. About how it stays with you even after the person is gone. About how it changes you. About how it never really ends. We finished dinner and I walked home along the cliff path. The stars were out bright and clear. The ocean was calm. And for the first time in 40 years, I felt like I could breathe. When I got home, I sat down at my kitchen table and pulled out a piece of paper. I picked up a pen and started to write. Not to Margaret, not to Eliza, but to myself. To the version of me who'd stayed home that night. Who'd let fear win. Who'd spent his whole life running from the truth. I wrote, "Dear Samuel, I forgive you." That was all. Just 3 words. But they were the only words that mattered. I folded the paper and put it in an envelope. I addressed it to myself. And then I did something I'd never done before. I walked outside in the dark and dropped it in my own mailbox. I don't know if it'll ever arrive. I don't know if it needs to. But I sent it anyway. Because some letters aren't meant to be delivered. They're meant to be written. They're meant to be sent. They're meant to exist. And that's enough. The next morning, I went back to the park one last time. The tree was still there. The plaque was still there. But something felt different. Lighter. Like the air itself had changed. I knelt down and touched the bronze letters of her name. And I whispered, "Thank you." I don't know if she heard me, but I think she did. Because the wind picked up. Just then, carrying the smell of rain and salt and something else. Something that smelled like hope. I stood up and walked home. And I didn't look back. Weeks went by. Then months. I kept myself busy. I fixed the fence in my yard. I painted the shutters. I started going to the farmer's market on weekends and talking to people I'd ignored for years. I started living again, really living, not just existing. And then one day, I got a letter in my mailbox. There was no return address. Just my name written in handwriting I recognized. My own. I opened it right there on the porch. Inside was the letter I'd written to myself. The one that said, "I forgive you." But there was something else too. Another line written below it in different ink. It said, "I know, and I forgive you too." I stared at it for a long time. I don't know who wrote that second line. Maybe I did in a moment I don't remember. Maybe Eliza did as a gift. Or maybe Margaret did somehow from wherever she is. It doesn't matter, because whoever wrote it, they were right. I folded the letter and put it in my pocket. And I walked down to the ocean. The waves were gentle today, lapping at the shore like they were whispering secrets. I pulled the letter out and held it in my hand. And then I let it go. I watched it float on the water, drift out toward the horizon. And I smiled, because some letters don't need to be kept. They don't need to be saved or framed or tucked away in a drawer. They just need to be sent. They need to be released. They need to find their way home. And this one finally had. I walked back to my cottage and sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the water. The sky was orange and pink and gold. The air was warm. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. something I thought I'd lost forever. Peace. Not happiness, not joy, just peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop running, when you finally face the truth, when you finally let go. I thought about Margaret one last time, about the letter that had brought me here, about the words I'd written and the words she'd somehow written back, about the way love works even when it doesn't make sense, even when it hurts, even when it's too late. And I realized something. It's never too late. Not really, because love doesn't end when someone dies. It doesn't disappear when time passes. It just changes. It becomes something else, something quieter, something that lives in the spaces between words, in the memories you keep, in the letters you write even when you don't know who will read them. That night I slept without dreaming, and when I woke up the next morning, I felt different, lighter, like I'd been carrying something heavy my whole life and finally put it down. I made coffee and sat by the window and watched the ocean. And I thought, this is enough. This moment right here, this is enough. And it was somewhere across town, Eliza was probably tending her garden. Somewhere in the wind, the letter I'd released was probably sinking into the ocean. Somewhere in my chest, the crack that had opened up all those weeks ago was finally starting to heal. And somewhere I'd like to think Margaret was smiling. Not because I'd forgiven myself, not because I'd delivered the letter, but because I'd finally learned what she'd always known. That some things are worth waiting for, that some letters take a lifetime to write, and that love never really ends. It just finds new ways to deliver itself.